These lessons that are before us this morning, to be read on this second Sunday in the season after the Epiphany, a season of a variable set of Sundays in length, when we're invited to look for and to learn to recognize the manifestations, the appearances, the epiphanies of God at work in the world. The lessons that are before us this morning, and particularly the two from the Hebrew Bible, the book of 1 Samuel, and then from the Christian scriptures, the Gospel of John, these lessons together speak to us about the notion of a divine call, how God calls us to be in relationship with God, with other human beings, with the entire created order, about how God calls us to be a part of God's establishment of the reign, realm, and rule of God, that perfect balance of justice and righteousness and peace, which is woven into the very fabric of creation, but which is clouded and confused by the effects of human sin. In short, God calls us, calls you, calls me to engage in ministry, a ministry of a general nature or that of a more specialized task, the work engaged in by all the baptized as we carry out God's own work, God's own task, that which God has undertaken throughout centuries of human history. The divine call in the lessons that are ours today is first issued to Samuel, a young boy ministering to the Lord, as the author of the text puts it, living and working in the Jerusalem temple under the guidance of a mentor, Eli, an old blind priest. Some years before, Samuel had been dedicated to Yahweh's service by his mother Hannah. Hannah had longed for, had hoped for, had even prayed for a child, a son, in the midst of her long barrenness. And upon that child's unexpected, almost miraculous birth, she had given him over to the service of God. And so, after years of serving under Eli's tutelage in the temple of the Lord, Samuel hears the voice of the Lord calling out to him in the middle of the night after everyone else has gone to bed. I wish I could get Linda up here now to speak with the voice of the Lord. It was an unanticipated voice, wasn't it, from her? Back in, but appropriate. Back when I served in Canton, the resident baritone in the chorus, he was actually a bass in the choir, was Dick Daniels. You don't know Dick Daniels unless you're from Canton and lived there in the 70s and around that time, but Dick was a morning DJ on WHBC AM. He would play music for a summer Sunday, or in this case, a winter Sunday, and Dick had the voice of God. And when Dick Daniels read the voice of God, it was a little different. It sounded right, but it was a little different. You did it so well. Samuel. Because Samuel is well trained, he runs to the bedroom of his mentor, Eli, who, when awakened from out of a sound sleep, tells the boy that he was not the one doing the calling. 3 times the voice sounds, and 3 times the boy runs to Eli, who finally realizes, as the ancient author puts it, that the Lord was calling the boy. Eli instructs his young charge to answer the clearly divine call when it comes again with a proper liturgical response. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. And so the voice calls out a 4th time, Samuel, Samuel. And so Samuel responds, Speak, for your servant is listening, and lives are changed. Well, in much the same way and after the same fashion, God issues a call to human beings in the gospel lesson from John's story of our Lord's life, specifically a call to Philip and Nathanael, who respond to Jesus' invitation to follow me. The process is a common one for those of us who are familiar with this story, for we recognize that important news such as this is most often and most effectively communicated by word of mouth, one person speaking to another, and to another, and to another. Did you hear that I went ice skating last night? And another hears, and the excitement is shared. Philip is found by Jesus. It's interesting, it appears several times in the text. It isn't just they were wandering around and suddenly they met up. Jesus has an intention about finding particular people, and in this case, Philip. Jesus invites Philip to follow him, that is, to walk in his footsteps, to wander in his way, to get to know Jesus over time as an intimate and important friend. Philip then finds Nathanael intentionally. And Philip invites Nathanael, as Philip himself was invited. Philip invites Nathanael to join the movement, to walk with Jesus along the way. Nathanael is skeptical at first. Can anything good come from Haiti? Can anything good come from Nazareth? He sneers. But after taking Philip up on his offer to come and see, Nathanael goes to Jesus. And in a moment of insight, one might even say epiphany, Nathanael recognizes Jesus for who he really is, the Son of God, the King of Israel. Well, this text, the reading of which falls in the midst of the season of Epiphany, is itself an epiphany. That is, an opportunity for these human beings, Philip, Nathanael, Samuel, you, me, an opportunity for us to catch a glimpse of God at work in the world, and then to have our lives changed, transformed, our outlooks and insights altered forever. Martin Luther King Jr., in his book Stride for Freedom, describes a similar experience of epiphany-induced change, an experience that he cited again and again in his work. He called it the vision in the kitchen. Finding himself at a turning point in the struggle for justice for all God's people, as that struggle was taking place in Birmingham, Alabama, exhausted from the work, King found himself empty. He writes, "I was ready to give up, with my cup of coffee sitting untouched, but I tried to think of a way to move out of the picture without appearing a coward. In this state of exhaustion, when my courage had all but gone, I decided to take my problem to God. With my head in my hands, I bowed over the kitchen table and prayed aloud." Now I pause here to say that Martin King was a preacher. He was a pastor in the American Baptist Church. He was a seminary-trained scholar and theologian. And yet, like so many people who are well-trained in the stuff of Christian faith, prayer didn't come right away to him. It was only at a moment when he felt himself at his lowest that he thought, oh, maybe I should pray. King writes, "The words that I spoke to God that midnight are vivid in my memory. I'm here taking a stand for what I believe is right, but now I am afraid. The people are looking to me for leadership, and if I stand without strength and courage, they too will falter. I am at the end of my powers. I have nothing left. I've come to the point where I can't face it alone." At that moment, I experienced the presence of the divine as I had never experienced God before. It seemed as though I could hear the quiet assurance of an inner voice saying, "Stand up for justice, stand up for truth, and God will be at your side forever." Almost at once, he says, my fears began to go, my uncertainty disappeared, and I was ready to face anything. Bishop Tracy Smith Malone, our own Episcopal leader in the United Methodist Church here in East Ohio, described her experience of a call to ministry, a divine call to the ministry of the bishop, as a sense that came about not all at once in a flash, but over time, after a series of circumstances and events in her life. Bishop Malone had an inkling of God's call on her life, an inner notion that the Divine One was inviting her, an African-American woman, into a wider and broader and deeper sort of service. Others confirmed the call, colleagues, family, friends. And so, as she puts it, she walked through a door that eventually led to East Ohio, where she feels herself to be, as she put it, in the place where I'm supposed to be. Itineracy has a way of putting us in places where we wonder if the work of God is at work. This is the last of my 7 appointments, I think, in the United Methodist Church. Having begun ministry back in 1982 among the people of Belmont in southeastern Ohio. In each case, Diane and I wondered whether we were where we belonged. And every time we moved, we wondered that again. But with each move, and with a spirit of patience on our parts and on the part of the congregations that we served, we found that those appointments were places where ministry could take place and where we could make a difference. And I can say with certainty, after 3.5 years here and nearly 4, that like Bishop Malone, we are precisely in the place where we are meant to be. So all who seek after the call of God, all who listen to that voice when it speaks, who listen deeply to the will and the way of the one who has a call and a claim on all human life, all who are called, you and me, all who have responded to that divine call, whether we are lay or clergy, baptized or ordained, we come to know this sense of deep satisfaction about which the bishop speaks, a satisfaction that produces joy when and whenever we find ourselves in service to God and to humanity. My prayer then, in this new year, is that you and I and we together might likewise gain that sense of call, both for ourselves individually in our own households and also for our church as a body, as a community. My prayer is that we will come to know where we are supposed to be and how we are meant to serve God. For we are in a season of transition, you and I. We've just come through this period of financial adjustment, and now we're facing the trauma of a change in pastoral leadership. And we're also coming to terms with the fact that God is gathering us together as a single body, not only for worship in one room in 1 hour, but also for work in the world. Even now, though, I'm convinced that God is calling out to us, calling out to you and me, calling us by name, in fact, into new avenues of service, into new arenas of ministry, into new opportunities of being in relationship with God, with others, and with the created order. Here in Worcester, in Wayne County, and in the world. And because of this, we are able, with the psalmist, to sing, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. For it was you who formed me in my mother's womb. You knit together my inner parts. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. That I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. I try to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end. I am still with you. Offered up to you this day. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.